minutes, Alexandre.
Oh, second, I don't know, does the recording interrupted something here?
I'm sorry, Judith, give the red at 7:59 and that gives him 2 minutes grace.
7:59, not 8:01, okay.
And with that, I will call the meeting to order, standing in as the Sergeant at Arms. I want to welcome you to Professionally Speaking, where we quadruple the value of our members, particularly in the first meetings of the month when we give 4 evaluations for each speaker, plus a round robin. We're very proud of being able to offer, as all Toastmasters clubs do, a safe and supportive space for learning and for growing confidence in leadership and speaking skills. I would like to call on Karen in the room to please lead the Pledge of Allegiance, if you would.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much, Karen. And with that, I would like to hand the meeting over to our club president, Abhijit Joshi.
Thank you so much, Lindy. Today we have an exciting speaker with us. Before we get started, everyone, please turn on your cameras because this is going to be an interactive session. Thank you, Muriel. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Petra, can you come on camera? Todd, you have 2 cameras going on at the same time? Perfect. Let's get the party started. Our Toastmaster for today is our Vice President of Education. Please help me welcome Linda Wu. Linda, it's all you.
Thank you, Abhijit. Welcome to the meeting tonight. We are so happy to have Alexandra here to do a workshop for us. After joining Toastmaster in 2007, Alexandre Matte went from fearing the stage to loving it. He now gives back to the organization and to its members by offering participative training sessions to clubs, divisions, and districts. Specializing in storytelling for young audiences, Alexandra has traveled all over Canada, surpassing 150 visits online and in person, to help thousands of children discover the art and the power of storytelling. Multiple times decorated at the International Speech Contest, Alexandra took 2nd place in the World Championship of Public Speaking in 2002, out of 30,000 contestants. Any great speech starts with great writing. On his way to the top, Alexandra spent more than 75 hours writing and editing his speeches. While storytelling is an art, it's also a science. He used a very logical way of crafting his winning speeches. How did Alexandra use science to create art? Please welcome distinguished Toastmaster Alexandre Matte, the 7-minute hero, Alexandre Matte.
Merci, Linda. Thank you so much for your warm welcome. Thank you for the invitation as well. I'm joining you from the easternmost province of Canada in Newfoundland. We also call it, or they call it, the Rock. It's a beautiful state to go see it. It's also a very strange time zone. It's 1/2 hour later than the rest of the Atlantic provinces, and it's always confusing when we try to convert the timings. Now, I hope that my connection will stay on. If I ever cut out, just like well, I guess if it cuts out, I won't see you do something, but I've got my secondary device right here as a backup in case I start freezing here. Now, it's fun to be with you because how many times have I visited you this year? I think I've already visited you twice, and a lot of you are part of other either clubs or divisions that I've seen also. So it's almost like I've got a secondary home on the West Coast. When I started competing in the International Speech Championship, in the International Speech Contest in 2009, I didn't know really what I was doing. I didn't know how to write a speech. I was just going what we call at tâtons, trying trial and error, seeing what works. And it's only later in 2012 that my coach, Mark Hunter, 2009 world champion of public speaking, mentioned to me a formula, or not a formula, a structure that might be useful. The Hero's Journey from Joseph Campbell. Now, I'm curious to know if anybody knows of the Hero's Journey by Campbell. You can put your hand up or write in the chat, yes, I'm familiar. Or no, if you're not. Just to give me an idea. Let me see the chat here. Okay. Okay, we've got a few who are familiar. Let's just do a quick recap. Now, I'm going to share my screen with my secondary device. Help me by sending positive vibes that it works. And there it is. You can play along with it if there are ways to ask questions. But anyway, we've got the chat on Zoom. So if you want to ask questions, you can also ask in Zoom, or you'll be able to ask your questions directly to me by speaking. We can also speak, right? We are Toastmasters. So let's go right ahead and remind us what is the hero's journey, because this is after Mark Hunter told me about this, I started looking at it, but I didn't really research it until a few years later, when I started to be a storyteller and I was crafting and writing my own stories outside of Toastmasters. And I realized how powerful the hero's journey is. It was developed more as a way to analyze stories rather than create them, but we realize it's possible to use the formula to create stories, and it's been used. Christopher Vogler worked as a screenwriter with Disney, and he took the big book from Joseph Campbell that's about 500 pages, and he condensed it into 5 or 6 pages. That's very useful. Let's look at the hero's journey. Whoa, that's a lot of steps. 12 different steps. Now, when you look at a 1 hour and a half or 2 hour movie, you can imagine that those 12 steps, you can see that it starts at the ordinary world, the call to adventure, and it goes right down to the road back, the resurrection, and the return with the elixir at the end of the movie. You can read those steps if you like, but in a 7-minute speech, it's not very obvious to be able to have those 12 steps in a contest speech, for example. For your information, my 2022 summit, but at the base, I find that the minimum is 6 steps. So I've simplified it here. You can take a screen cap if you want, and I'll also let you know how you can receive this as a PDF later. So I don't think I'm going too fast, am I? We're okay? You're able to, okay, good. So here are the 6 steps as I present them for a 7-minute speech, a hero's journey in 6 steps. We start with the everyday life. The hero is seen in their everyday life, and we'll be able to look at some examples later. But basically, if you're writing a speech about yourself, for example, for the speech contest, you present the beginning of your story where everything seems to be going well. And then something happens. The second step, the call to adventure. Without this call, there is no story. There's no point of there's no point of telling us something if there's no call to adventure. Now, this can either come from someone else inviting the hero to go on the adventure, or it can come from something that happens to yourself. If you read a book, there's a call to adventure, you think of doing something. There's a trigger. By the way, I might not have mentioned this explicitly, but when I mention hero here, this is the main character. And usually when we are writing our speeches for speech contest or other Toastmasters style speeches, most of the time you will be your own main character. And if you are the hero, that doesn't mean that you are the all-powerful person that knows all the answers. We will see that in the next steps. It just means that you are the main character. Now, excuse me for 1 second. I'm getting a lot of buzzing noise from my own phone, and I just want to see if there's an urgency. I think we're okay. It's just my sister sending photos of something. Pardon me. So there's the call to adventure where the hero starts where really starts the story. And because there's a call to adventure, then you have the third step, the adventure and the difficulties. The hero lives the adventure, faces difficulties, and makes friends and enemies. If you think of a movie like a superhero movie, you often have well, you're familiar with Spider-Man. Okay, so if you imagine Spider-Man, at the beginning, he's just a regular guy in high school, right? The everyday life. There's an initiating incident. He gets bitten by a spider. Something happens with his superpowers, with his regular power. If something happens, he becomes super powerful, but then that brings adventures and difficulties. There's often a quote bad guy who comes in to try to defeat the hero, and he tries to defeat the bad guy. And this is so there might be of the aunt, right? And the girl. So all these characters come in and either help or hinder the hero in his adventure or her adventure. And while we are going into these adventures, there is the step number 4, the great challenge. It's good to have these adventures and the difficulties, but if you really want a sort of roller coaster of emotions in your stories, there needs to be one big challenge. And sometimes this can happen after everything seems to go well. In those superhero movies, almost every time, if not every single time in those movies, everything seems to be won. You're like at 1 hour and 20 minutes and okay, I think he's done his adventure. Everything's fine. But then the superhero rises and, I mean, the bad guy rises and there's one last big battle, right? So it's the greatest challenge yet, and the hero surmounts seemingly impossible odds. And by going through that great challenge, the hero goes through a very important element of the story, and that is the transformation. You will notice this in international speech contest. Speech show the transformation of the main character. The hero experiences the benefits of going through the great challenge. And when you can relate with your audience, when you can, I'm not sure if relate is the right word, it's a false friend. In French, we say relater. If you can show, demonstrate the transformation that you have gone through by going through that adventure, then it's your turn to share the wisdom with your audience. It can be done explicitly. Traditionally, in the past years, we've seen in the speech contests, people saying, now it's your turn. I was able to go through this experience and you are able to do it too. What will you do next time this happens to you? Right? But lately, I think we're becoming more subtle. It's more of an invitation rather than telling people what to do. Imagine what we can do if together we do this. The world will be a better place. You share the wisdom to improve the world. This is what Campbell calls the return with the elixir. Okay, let me just check with you now. If you are still with me. Can you still on board with me after these 6 steps? Yes, Muriel, all's good? Ça va bien, Muriel?
I just put in the chat that it's all good, Alexandre. Yes. Uh-oh, did we lose you?
My iPhone has just failed. So while that tries to reconnect, I'm back here. All right, can you hear me correctly? Okay.
Yes.
So, allô Muriel, tout va bien?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so the video quality is not as good on this machine, but we can still communicate. All right, so let me see. Okay, I'm back here. Let's return to this and see. Now, I'm not sure how many of you are connected to the Menti. But if anyone's connected, you can try to place these steps in the right order. This is a pop quiz. Or if you want to write in the chat, in which order do you put it? Is it the call to adventure first? You can write, for example, if you think everyday life goes first, you write 2. And then if you think it's adventure and difficulties, 5, transformation, share the wisdom, and in the chat. It's pretty obvious, right? That the first step is the everyday life. All right, Linda, did you get it? Now, oh, you know what? Because we started answering, the numbers are not in the right spot. Okay, so Linda, I think you got it. We have the everyday life, and then the call to challenge, the transformation, and the call to adventure, and sorry, the sharing of the wisdom at the end. And I like Muriel's comment in the chat. I love the hero returns to share the wisdom. Lovely. Merci, Muriel. Now, I wanted to give you the example from my semi-final speech. And I could ask you, I'm curious to know who has seen my semi-final speech. Lift up. No, sorry, that's my final speech. My final speech, missing ingredient. Who has seen that one? About my no-bake cake and my grandmama. Okay. For the everyday life, I start the speech with telling you about the family reunion. And I present the characters, grandmama, my Aunt Christiane, and the no-bake cake, which can be almost considered a character. The call to adventure is when my Aunt Christiane passes away and the family struggles to stay together. In the adventure, I try to make the cake as my contribution to the family. And Pierre, my uncle, is there to critique it. It takes 12 years for me to succeed. So here is where usually you could think, oh, well, that's the end of the story. He succeeded to create the cake. But the great challenge would be missing. And this is where I tell you, my grandmama has also passed away. And this is where this was a particularly emotional part of the story. And honestly, I wish for you to have those emotional parts in your story as well. When you share with us the great challenge, it's usually a very difficult moment in your experience, but it can also be the most rewarding. Oftentimes, the biggest rewards are after the biggest difficulties, right? So in the great challenge, we're not sure what's going to happen with our family and with our tradition. And I compare it to the Jewish people's traditions and Fiddler on the Roof, which I introduced at the beginning of the speech as well. And the transformation for myself, but for my family as well, it's when I realize that the family can remain intact because of our yearly tradition. At the very end, I share the wisdom by inviting you to keep the traditions going with the key sentence, traditions hold us together. Now, there are some steps that are in between, and if we had a full day workshop, then we could go into those details. or if you want to learn more, then we can get in touch. But this is the example for my final speech from last year. And Lady mentions that you'd like to go back and watch the speech again. Yeah, and you know what? What you can do also is watch other championship speeches and try to see if those steps are included. Okay, let me go now to my next slide where I invite you to create your story outline. I'd like to give you just 5 minutes. Usually in 5 minutes, you can find your 6 steps to create your next great speech or your next great story. You can take something that you've already written and see if you've got those 6 steps. And if not, what can you do to find it? Or you can write something new. What I have found is that people who often struggle to write their stories because they're not sure in which order to put things, when they have this formula or these 6 steps, it comes much easier. So what I can do is start a counter right here. And if there are any questions, I think you can just blurt it out. So you can, I'll start the counter now. If there are any questions, don't hesitate to ask, okay? And can you see that? Can you see it well enough? If you and maybe one of you will show us your example. We've got about 1 minute left. How's it going? Thumb up. Has anybody finished writing your 6 steps? And by the way, you don't write the full speech, just 1 or 2 sentences per step. Manage to find or identify your 6 steps in your hero's journey for this story. Let me know in the chat. You can write, I'm done. Ah, Linda is done. Great. So now let me ask you, Linda. Would you like to share with the group what you've done?
Yeah. It's not a typical hero's story, but I tried my best to follow these steps. So the first step is that my normal knife. I always admire people who plays Tai Chi very well. Tai Chi, yeah, it's a traditional Chinese martial art. I always admire those people, but I never tried because it looks so difficult for me. And then the next step is that answering the calling. And then I was diagnosed with a high blood pressure, and the doctor told me that playing Tai Chi and doing meditation, things like that, can help me to improve my health condition. Okay, so I answered the call. I find the best teacher I found the best teacher in my local area, and I started to learn from him. And I had to get up early in the morning, and I had to practice also at noon time under the sun blaze, and it's very difficult, very hard, and it's very hard for me to master all the steps, but I did it. And then people, all my colleagues and my teacher told me that I'm doing very well. They encouraged me to participate in a competition. It's an international competition. And so I agreed, and I started intense practice with my teacher and also my fellow members. But then I worked so hard that I hurt my knee, and I cannot continue anymore. So and I couldn't walk because I hurt my knee. I had to lay down on bed for several weeks. It was really painful for me. And then with some doctor's help, I was able to, I recovered. And then I realized that what's important, I needed to focus on what's really important for me, because in the beginning, I intended to improve my health condition. I intended to control my blood pressure, but then I went to the wrong way. I wanted to join the international competition, and I hurt myself. So the lesson I learned is that to focus on what's really important for you. It's not a typical hero's journey, because if it's a real hero's journey, I should be going to the international competition. I should be the winner.
Linda, that was great. It's a super great example. You say it's not the typical hero's journey. On the contrary, this is ideal. This is a great example, because you did go through a great challenge, and you don't need to win in order to have that transformation. And that's exactly what happened. You learn something through defeat. So you, in a certain sense, you don't win the competition, but you win something else.
Thank you.
You've got all these steps. So have you? Let me ask you, Linda. Have you already shared this experience in a speech or elsewhere?
No, I never shared
Is this the
story.
first time that you share it?
Yes, it is.
This is great. You see what we can do with just an easy to follow formula. And so I think the only thing I would recommend at this point is the everyday life. It might not be about admiring people who do Tai Chi. It might just be something else, because the problem or the adventure happens when the doctor recommends Tai Chi. So Tai Chi doesn't even need to be at the very beginning, but it's one option.
Yeah.
Merci beaucoup, Linda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else want to give it a go? Oui, je vois la main de Karen. Karen, let's hear what you have to say. Go ahead. Now, I know that the non-verbal is very important, but let's try with words, okay?
I've always had challenges with my hair, and they have gone from bad to worse. And what I'm having trouble with here, I'm hearing myself on my phone.
Sorry, that's my fault.
Feedback. Okay. So are we clear now?
Sorry, Karen, can you start over for me?
Okay. I've always, women and hair, it's a challenge for most of us. And for me, it was a special one. I was born with naturally curly hair, and I grew up and it grew down to my waist. And we lived, and my parents lived on a farm just before World War II ended, and we did not have a lot of the amenities that most people have, most children have growing up. I've told this story to my classmates in college, and they just were appalled. But anyway, hair washing was a big deal, and it always resulted in pumping on a hand pump with cold water to rinse the hair, bending over the sink, all kinds of painful things. And my mother and I would scream and yell, and my mother would say, if you don't be quiet, we're just going to have to cut your hair page board length or shoulder length. And boy, did that ever sound good to me. So one day I got behind the sofa with the scissors, and like every kid cuts their hair, I cut my hair shoulder length with my ear to my shoulder, clipping on one side. That started all kinds of problems. My mother was appalled. When she did cut the hair to make it even, here I was with short, straight hair. And she spent a lot of time trying to make my hair curly again. And one thing was to take me to the beauty salon. And this was in the 1940s. And that's when they had these contraptions that had the strings, the electrical strings on them that heated up, that had rods on them. They put it in your hair. And I couldn't take it. I couldn't take it. So I started screaming and hollering. And eventually, I got out of that situation, which I'll describe in a speech. I don't want to give it all away now, but I'm having trouble figuring out what the next great challenge is. We did start to do home permanents. And if you've ever done a home permanent. And they were always the night before the school pictures were taken. And there's a certain procedure that we went through. So I guess the next great challenge would be the home perms and the results in the school pictures and everything like that. I just, to me, there's two situations, two attempts to make the curls that didn't happen. And I don't see any one as being any greater than the other. The problem was never totally resolved until we stopped messing with my hair.
Okay, I'm gonna come back here. All right. Thank you, Karen, for sharing that. Now it sounds like you're not exactly sure what is the great challenge. Maybe it is the permanent. I remember those from the 80s as well.
Yes. I could bring the 80s into it too.
So, Karen, what would you say that you have learned from all this experience? What's your transformation?
I have learned that I have naturally curly hair. All I need is humidity. This climate curls my hair. I never needed a permanent.
Okay, interesting. And now I'm curious to know from the others, is there a lesson that is for us all that has nothing to do with hair?
Well, I think trying to force results often brings chaos. And there was a chaos. This kid was screaming out on the street, "Get that bucket off my head." You know, it was just horrible scenes that are hilarious now. But yes, never try to force a solution in an unnatural way.
There you go.
We can't always get back what we've had in the past in the exact way. And why would we want it?
Karen, you just developed a story that leads to a natural conclusion and a sharing of the wisdom.
Yes.
You have something very specific, a story about hair, but that gives an important life lesson at the end. Is this the first time you're sharing this publicly like this?
I did this speech years ago, and it came back and I realized I could do better. So I want to do it again with using your message that you've given to us and putting a little more thought in it and perhaps having a moral to the story. Yes. I would like to take that story and rework it.
Okay, awesome. I'd like to ask, and thank you again, Karen. So I don't know where to look. This is the camera that's on now, not that one. So thanks, Karen, for sharing. Is there a third person who wants to share?
Is there a time limit for the story length, or? I'm sorry, I'm driving.
That's it.
So Alexandra, is that how long should be the story?
Well, I'm thinking if you're able to keep it within 3 minutes, that's ideal. Okay. Because you can it can be very short if you know where you're going with your 6 steps. But we've got time if you need more than 3 minutes. Hi, Steve.
Oh, okay. Hi, sorry. Yeah. My story actually is a cat story, which happened recently. I'm a new pet person. I have never raised pet before. But last year, I was very fortunate and I met the little kitty, and I named her Angela. She's about 9 months old now. Actually, what I want to say about this story is about procrastination. Okay, I always, I always plan to, because when the cat becomes 6 months old, you need to spay them. Unfortunately, this is something I didn't do it. I planned to do it. I planned for a long time. I read lots of documentations which asked me to do it. And I talked to my friends who raise cat, also suggest me do it. I had the plan. I planned to do it. But I didn't do it until one day, last month, on May the 1st. The very evening when everybody is enjoying our life, my kids is playing computer games, one of them. Another one is enjoying him on the balcony, playing some drums with some wood sticks he picked up in the neighborhood. And I'm watching my favorite show. But suddenly, my son came to me and said, Dad, Angela jumped. Angela jumped. What? Jumped? So I immediately ran off. I lived on the 4th floor. So I immediately ran off to the first floor of the building. And then I met my neighbor, Mr. Xu, and he told me he heard something bang was on the floor. But he thought somebody threw something out of the window. But then he saw my cat. And luckily he was there because Angela crawled under one of the cars. I came to reach her, and I can see that there's blood in her eyes, blood in her nose, and even blood in her teeth. So I was devastated. I thought I'm gonna lose her. So tears were in my eyes. I thought I'm gonna lose her. So I was very sad. So without hesitation, I drove her to the hospital with my neighbor. So when the doctor checked, the vet checked and said, you have 2 options because we can see blood inside her. So option 1, we operate on her tonight because we're not sure if there's organ damage. Maybe we can save her. Option 2, wait till tomorrow. But we wait till tomorrow, see if the blood will not increase. Maybe there's no internal organ damage. So I carefully thought about it, and I'm very fortunate I made the right choice. I took option 2 because she was so weak. I thought I'm gonna lose her. But luckily, we operated on her a few days ago. Now she's on the way to recover. So yeah, my lesson from this story is never be a procrastinator like me. So if you plan something, do it immediately. Don't wait. Don't just do it. Plan it, execute. Don't wait. Because I really regretted for what I didn't spay her earlier. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Stephen. Linda asks, did you get her spayed now? Has it been done?
The plan is because I talked to the vet. The vet said after 1 month, because right now she's still in the recovery. So 1 month later, I'm gonna do it. So definitely this time I'm gonna do it. I already scheduled. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. So I've got one question, and then we can go into the formula and the structure. What is the link between spaying the cat and what happened to her? If you don't spay her, is that what makes her act
Yeah.
strangely?
Yeah, so when the cat was not spayed, they always they jump floors. So that's, and I think that the moment she jumped, she was what do you call that? She was on heat. She was
Right.
she was at the stage of heat on heat. So that's why she jumped.
She's looking for a mate.
Yes, she was
Okay.
looking for a mate. So that's the
Got it.
reason. Yeah.
Okay, so let's be a little more clear. So I got the lesson, basically it's what you have learned from this experience, right? So step number 5, where you change now. In fact, you know what? Let's delve a little deeper for everybody on the step number 5, the transformation. Because there's a difference between, okay, I learned what I should do now. I won't procrastinate. There's a difference between that and acting on it and proving that you have lived a transformation. Stephen, after you, now this is very recent, correct? So
Yes.
I'm not sure if you, maybe you're not sure either if you've fully lived through that transformation. You learned a lesson about not procrastinating because of this experience, but are there other parts of your life where you apply this new wisdom?
Other parts of the life. I think maybe exercise is also one more thing. I started to push myself to exercise now every day. So I
You
also
started to do that recently?
No, I was doing it like few years ago. Then I stopped. I stopped a few years, and then I started again last year. Then I stopped again, but now I restarted. So and I keep it for a few months already. So
Okay, all right. So this is like something that, especially for the international speech contest, I've experienced myself. It's the importance of truly living your message. Were you really transformed by this experience, or is it possible that you will go back to your old habits of procrastinating? So this is why I want you to think about it. Have you really transformed, or is it just it was just one experience and I'll wing it next time? This is one of the great things about speech writing. I found that trying to create your speech and giving a message to the world, it has made me reflect on the lessons that I'm sharing with other people. And every time that I've worked a long time on a speech, I've realized, hey, I might not be really following my own advice here. Why should I be giving it to other people? Well, that's something else to think about when you're writing your stories and sharing your wisdom. Are you listening to yourself? Okay.
Thank you.
So that, yeah. So if you want to keep going, keep writing that particular story, check one step at a time, see if it fits with the model, but consider making sure that you've really transformed before sharing the wisdom. Thanks, Stephen, for playing along.
Thank you.
Okay, now I'd like to ask everyone in attendance if you have, or what is the main takeaway that that you can take away from this session. What's the one thing? You can either write it in the chat or let me know. Raise your hand and share. What's the one thing or two things that you really want to that will change how you either write your speeches or think about them? Lindy.
You have done a marvelous job simplifying and clarifying this journey into something that can work in 7 minutes, because I've been exposed to Joseph Campbell's journey for writers especially, and it can be very complicated in the way it's described. Going into the cave, coming out of the cave, what does that mean? So I appreciate the simplicity, and it's going to help me. I have to come up with another speech about now, and this is really helpful. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Lindy. Yeah, the innermost cave and the ordinary world and the special world. Yeah, there's so many, and the book is 500 pages long, so there's so much to learn. But I really like to be able to simplify it. And then once you either mastered or you really understand those simple steps, then you can go and figure out more. Anyone else? What have you particularly learned or appreciated from today? Sandra?
Thank you, Alexandra. I totally affirm what Lindy just said. For me, this is a very clear, linear approach, a template that I can easily use to dissect my prior speeches and see how to revise them and strengthen them. And in fact, I must confess, during the 5 minutes, I pulled up a speech I'd been thinking of revisiting and revising. It's about now, I think, 5 years old. And right from the very beginning, just from today, just from your 6-step strategy, I saw gaps that I'd missed. So this is very exciting to me to take a look at that speech and get going and not procrastinate, as Stephen was saying, to strengthen it and use it again and learn from your experience. So thank you so much. I've attended a lot of storytelling workshops over the years, a lot, but this one really resonates with me and my particular style of learning, because I know we each have our own best way of learning. This one works for me. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that, Sandra. I was with a friend who's competing in her district contest this week, and she got to me and she said, I don't know, something's missing. It's like it's too easy. And I said, well, let's go through these steps. And we realized there was no great challenge. It was just too easy. And she's like, I don't think there was any great challenge. But I asked her a question. Well, when this particular thing, when it's about the carer for her mother, I said, well, when she left, was it difficult, or was it like, okay, she's gone? She said, no, it was the most difficult thing ever. Well, there you go. That's a great challenge. That's what you need to put in. So we, as you say, Sandra, we identified the gap and we're able to fill it in.
And for me, I totally missed the everyday life. I jumped right into the big challenge. So
okay.
I definitely see how I can improve that. I already have some ideas. So thank you. I really appreciated it a lot. I'm so glad that you are here with us for this workshop and that I showed up. It was very valuable to me. Thank you.
Merci, Sandra. And you know what? Sandra has just mentioned something that deserves a little more attention. You said you went straight into the conflict or straight into the great challenge. Now, this is sometimes a strategy that you will see in speeches, in stories, and sometimes in movies. You can start with something that has a lot of action, a lot of tension, and then you'll see 6 months earlier, and you go to the beginning of the story. So it's a strategy to gain your attention right away, to wonder, okay, what's going to happen? I did this with my semifinal speech last year. I started in the great challenge. You're wrong. You're just wrong. A family reunion, and then I go back and I bring you to the adventure on the chairlift. So, but I did start with something difficult.
Oh yes,
but
Excuse me, yeah, that is a strategy of how to formulate the content in writing. But what you're saying today, which I truly understand, is that each of these components must be intentionally present in the speech.
That's
And
right. And
I
sometimes,
had, oh, excuse me, and I had missed the everyday life entirely.
right. And sometimes it won't be in the exact same order, and there can be some flashbacks and flash forwards. But if you start with the basics, as we mentioned with Lindy, it's a great way to know if you've got a great story potential before making it more complex or more elaborate. Are there any questions before we close? Or before we start closing?
Curious,
Oui, Lindy.
Alexandre, are you using is this the formula you use to teach kids?
No, with kids, it's even more simple, depending on the age and depending on what we're working on. When I do it with high school kids, I give them 4 steps. And actually, I don't call them steps. It's the 4 essential elements for a good story: a character, conflict, solution, transformation. So I don't mention the call to action or the great challenge. Conflict and solution, transformation. And I don't either go to the sharing the wisdom, but I go right to the essential.
Thank you. That's interesting. Thank you.
Alexandra, Vivian has her hand up.
Yes, Vivian.
Alexandra, I love you to the moon and back, because I finally got it figured out. You see, I'm 71 years old and telling a story that's decades, man, that's not years. And finally, I figured it out. When you put those 6 numbers, something in my funny brain, and Lindy knows this, clicked. And I realized, why don't I chunk it in 10 years? Why don't I chunk it in decades? And I finally figured out my story is actually from 1963 to 2023, and it is so clear. I realized something was happening every decade, and I found home in 2023. Now, how do you like that? Like, gee, my brain wasn't working all this time. Alexandra, can I take you home?
Well, that's amazing, Vivian. You
Yes.
got one large life story that spans decades, and you can condense it into those 6 steps.
Alexandra, I'll give it to you now in like 10 seconds flat. I'm
Sure,
a
let's do it.
Filipino. Yeah, Filipino. I wasn't educated in a Philippine school. I was educated in it's called the American International School. And you have that in every country around the world. So I was never with Filipinos. You know what life is like when you're a square peg in a round hole? It's hell in 6 decades. What's my answer? I'm not saying I'm blessed with the pandemic, but in the pandemic, I found Zoom. Where most people hate Zoom, I'm a TV personality. Cameras are my home. Seeing nobody behind the camera is my home. I'm not talking about just Zoom, I'm talking about Zoom Toastmasters. But my mistake was, I just started with a Philippine club here, and you know what it's like to be a square peg in a round hole? I got nailed to the wall and I got hung upside down. I decided to leave my country's district, go to America. Now I am in 2 regular clubs in America, 1 advanced and 1 in Germany. where this Saturday I'm speaking in USA, representing Germany and physically in the Philippines with Toastmasters in Zoom. And Alexandre, you should start some medical psychological line where you made the clicks in my brain work. I mean, no psychiatrist can figure this out. I think you've got a new career. Think about that. I love you.
Wow. Thank you, Vivian. Well, you know, it's not for nothing that we say stories are, what do we say? Stories are like a gateway to human understanding, a way for us to share. We share our wisdom, but we share our lives as well. And sometimes just by, hey, you know what, Vivian, I've never thought of looking at the whole life as a one long story, but that's something that would be interesting, and it could be therapeutic maybe. Yeah. Wow, thanks so much for sharing that.
Thank you. And the bottom line you gave me, Alexandre, is the greatest gift is I'm what you call a TCK. You can Google that. I'm a third culture kid. Multicultural is home to me. But for most people, home is a small town. And you made my brain say it. This is the first time I've said it. TCK, multicultural, around the world, across different time zones, is home to me. So thank you. You're the best therapist in the world. I think Toastmasters should have a new department for Alexandre to start something therapeutic, mind-changing stuff. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Ah, ben, merci, Vivian. You know, there's nothing really special about me. I just took something very complicated and I condensed it into one page. So I'm glad it can be useful for other people as well. I think we've got more time for questions, yes? Because it's now some time. I'm looking at my clock, but that doesn't help at all. I think I've got still 10 minutes, yes?
Yeah.
Am I right? Okay,
Yes.
thanks, Abby. Any other questions?
Alexandra, I don't have a question so much as a comment. This is Elena. I'm in venue, our in-person meeting place. And I just appreciate this structure as showing me how I can take something that I don't think of as heroic and still use the hero's journey to make it interesting and meaningful. So thank you for that.
Right. Well, thank you, Elena, for sharing. Yeah, if you see the individuals who have won the World Championship of Public Speaking, when I say most of them, yeah, I think most of them, it's not climbing Mount Everest or battling dragons. It's taking a walk with a grandfather, or giving compliments to people, or being moved by a movie. Everyday things, everyday situations. And that's actually what makes it more relatable than grandiose things, as long as there's something meaningful that you can share with your audience.
I like to say one thing, Alexandre, is I have spent a great deal of my time many, many years ago with Joseph Campbell. I read many of his books. I listened to the tapes. I have never thought that I will hear about Joseph Campbell, how to put a speech together. I have never, this is really a kind of a shocking thing to me. I always saw Joseph Campbell as a whole other person doing different things for our lives. So this is was actually quite an amazing journey, I must say. So thank you.
Thank you, Judith. This is the kind of reaction that I love, because it's taking something that's complicated, making it simpler, and realizing that you can do something of quality with simple steps. If anyone wants to reach me further, you can reach me on my website. I will stick around also after this meeting for a few minutes. It's getting late here, so just a few minutes. But you can also join the standout community for weekly coaching calls, and you can try it for free. We, depending on where you are, if you're working on a speech, on a story, then we can go even more in details with the hero's journey. I know there's someone in this room right now who is a member and who joins us almost every week, and I think it has been very useful for her. Linda is showing the thumbs up. So Linda, why don't you share a little bit of, I'm putting you on the spot if you don't mind. How is it, those weekly calls?
I'm really grateful that Alexandra spent so much time with me and other standout community members. He coaches us every week. Basically, when Abhijit told me that, suggested that to talk about my personal story, I had no idea how to talk about my own personal story to make it a speech. So I reached out to Alexandra, and I told him, I basically throw out everything to him. I told him what happened, how I felt, a bunch of information. I told him about 20 minutes, messy, all this. I even didn't know what I was talking about, but he was able to use this hero's journey to give me a structure, to help me to define what I should talk about in the beginning. And then for the, basically he told me the structure of the speech. And then I was able to come out with a speech. So before I presented it in English, I presented it in Chinese in my local club, but without following Alexandra's structure. I just followed my basic intuition. So people were touched by my story, but they said it's good. Okay, yeah. And then after Alexandra helped me to define the structure, did all this, I presented it to them again, following the structure. They told me it's much better. They told me that this could be a very good contest speech. So the local people kept encouraging me to make it a contest speech. And I also presented in the professionally speaking club, and also got many good feedback from the club members. So the start point is that first I get advice from someone, from Abhijit. Then I didn't know, I had no idea how to make this idea to a good speech. Alexandra helped me in the very beginning, and he's really helpful. And he's also able to give us not only me and also other standout community members help us to fine tune, to brush our presentation skills. I benefited a lot in the past half a year. It's really helpful.
Thank you, Linda. Yeah, it has been half a year. And by the way, this was unrehearsed, unplanned. Thank you so much, Linda, for letting us know this. I'm going to write something in the chat here. It's an evaluation form for today. If you have 2 minutes, please fill this form out. You can continue writing either what you've learned or what you recommend. And when you fill that in, I believe that the thank you page will include the link to the PDF of of what you saw today, the 6-step hero's journey, as well as other links and information.
Sorry, may I ask
Yes.
you one more question? Yeah,
of course.
I think I always struggle about what to talk about. I think not only me, many other members have the same problem. So I saw your speech. about your travel with your twin babies, and also your semi-final speech about the lifting up. Looks like all this speech are about not mundane, about life, daily life, nothing big. So my question is, how did you do this? How were you able to find something really interesting and also meaningful in your normal daily life and make it a beautiful speech?
Well, yeah, thanks for the question. I think there are two answers. The first one is a while ago when I was also struggling to find some speech subjects. I would ask myself some questions, and a lot of these questions come from J.A. Gamache, a fellow competitor and who made it to the world finals at least 4, if not 5 times. J.A. is from District 61. He won 3rd place in the world in 2001. And he has a series of questions to help you find subjects. And one of them is, if you were on your deathbed, what would be the one wisdom that you would share with your children or with your significant other? What would you share with them? Or another question might be simply, what is the best memory that you have as a child? Or when is the first time that you tried something new that was significant and difficult? Some prompts like this can help you find subjects. So I said that was like the first sort of answer, but the second one is, you can always be on the lookout for subjects. And that's now how I work, and I'm sure that many people in the room, because we're Toastmasters and we're looking for subjects, sometimes you'll be walking down the street, you see something that hits you, and you know, oh, that would make a great speech, right? You hear something. How many times have you heard, oh, there's a speech there, or I think that would make a great speech? Yeah, so that's another way of doing it. I have a friend from my district, Neil Dunsmore, one of the best speakers I know. And he says, don't try to find subjects for your speeches. Live a great life and then talk about it. And maybe it goes the other way around too. Maybe you try to create a speech with wisdom to share, and then you realize, oh, I need to live more like this. And it creates a great life, but then you are also able to share that transformation with others as well. That was a long-winded answer for your simple question. Does it answer it adequately?
Yeah, thank you. And then how do you get a clear message from your normal, from your, the things you experience? Yeah, that's also a big challenge for me.
Right, you mean, how can you concisely share a message? Yeah, that's a complicated one. Sometimes you need to talk it out with someone and see what your audience takes out of it, from it. When I was going for the World Championship, I had a simple 2-question form. I didn't ask anybody, what should I do to make my speech better? I asked, what are you getting out from my presentation today? And that's it. By that time, my speech was really at a high level, so my key sentences were clear. But it's also something that you can ask your audience when you're closer to the beginning of your process. You can share your story, share your transformation, but before you share the wisdom, you can stop and then ask the audience, what are you getting out of it? And maybe your audience will help you develop the end of your speech, the sharing of the wisdom. That's one way of doing it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this today. The time went by quickly. I'm glad that you you shared some stories with me that hopefully this will be useful for you in the future. And please do get in contact with me if you want to have further learning, and I'll certainly keep in touch. Looks like we're developing a nice friendship here. So I will end it there and hand it back to you, Linda, Madame Présidente. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else has any other question for Alexandra? So if no more question, I will hand this to our general evaluator, our beloved Lindy McLean.
Thank you so much, Linda. Thank you, Alexandre. As a general evaluator today, really what I want to do is facilitate a round robin, not so much a round robin as just another opportunity to say what you're taking away, what really worked for you. We've had several people say that already in different ways, but even champions appreciate finessing. So anything that you have that worked really well or that might make it work even better, please raise your hand if you have something to contribute. Lesuk, you need to unmute.
Yes. Very important and inspiring and impressive sentence I heard from Alexandra. It is, are you listening to yourself? So it hit upon me that through the six stages, I should apply it to all 6 stages. So in that respect, I'd like to say thanks a lot to Alexandra. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Lesuk. Anyone else?
Lindy, this is Karen.
Go ahead, Karen.
Alexandra, thank you very much for this. I actually have one comment and one question. My comment is what struck me. I've heard these steps before, but what I hadn't really thought about was the second layer of conflict. You talked about there being the challenge, but then you took it further and said insurmountable obstacles. And I've always seen the challenge in a story, but this made me think about what makes it insurmountable. And to me, that was an interesting distinction. So I took that away. And the question that I had for you was, what is your take on taking a story that you've created, but perhaps making it a little bit bigger, like exaggerating the truth a bit, or bringing in perhaps a character that didn't really exist? What is your take on that? You talk a lot about it being a real story, your story, you involved in it, and you don't need anything else because your life is interesting and there's lessons to be learned. But what about when you want to bring home a point and you think this additional character would help do that? Is that good, bad, indifferent?
My take on it, generally speaking, I am not in favor of inventing things that would bring it too much into the fictional world. The example that you give is very relevant. Inventing a character just so that it makes more sense. I was with someone who was working. Well, she won the district, so she's going on the next stage, next step. I do believe she will be semi-finalist. She was superb, and she was starting to work on her potential final speech. And she told the story, and then she said, and I've got this, I need the guru, I need someone, I can't just come from me, so I'm gonna invent something. I'm gonna say my aunt shared this wisdom with me. And I said, well, if you do that, then it doesn't, it's not real anymore. Surely your wisdom comes from somewhere. It's not your aunt. What is it? And we kept talking, and she realized she had a friend who had shared with her that wisdom years before. It didn't just pop into her head. It came from somewhere. Oftentimes, you don't need to invent something just to make it good. You just need to ask yourself the right questions to find the truth. Now, embellishing something or changing the words here and there to make it more palatable or concise, that's fine. You're not inventing characters, you're not making up a story. But yeah, I wouldn't make up stories or events just to make the story better.
Thank you.
A quote that I shared on LinkedIn the other day was, the truth is often better than fiction.
Thank you, Alexandre. Judith, we have just a few minutes, so go ahead.
I just want to say that one of the things that happens with invented stories, I find that it doesn't become yours. And so when you are presenting a story that's invented, people know that it's not your story. And so I think that is one of the things that I sometimes have some chance to work with some people, that it's the audience know that it is not your story. And so it doesn't really work that well. I think that's what I think about embellishing stories.
It's difficult to be sincere when you're making stuff up.
Yeah. And the connection is kind of not there with the audience.
I still regret inventing some facts in my 2009 regional speech. I wanted to make it more, I created things. I was relating something that had happened at my house, and I was looking at the neighbor, but instead I transformed it and I was in a coffee shop and looking at a stranger. But it just didn't feel right when I was delivering it. It was a sort of the same event, but I changed it so much that it wasn't real anymore.
Thank you, Judith and Alexandre. We're almost to the top of the hour. I want to say a couple things quickly. Alexandre, while I was promoting, I'm VP. Am I? Yes, I am VP PR in this club. And while I was promoting, Alexandre said genius. When I put in the finalists, I said, have you experienced the genius of Alexandre? He said, genius. And I do want to say to you, it truly is a genius to be able to take a complex thing and simplify it. That really is a genius, a superpower. So I encourage you to own that particular genius, because that is one of yours. And I do thank you for sharing it with us. It was powerful today, and I know that anyone watching the recording will also get a lot from it. So we thank you for that. I'm going to
thank you so much.
Stop the recording.